Welcome to another episode of Inner Peace, Better Health. I'm your host, Eric, and today we have an incredibly special guest with us. Joining me is Matt Cook, a renowned health and sex researcher who has helped over 80,000 people reclaim their sex health lives. Matt is the head of the largest alternative health online university, GetMemberAccess.com. From relationships dynamics to prostate health, and from women's issues to the secrets of fulfilling sex life, Matt has seen it all. So buckle up for an enlightening and engaging conversation that promises to challenge your perspectives and inspire you to take action. Mac, I'm sorry, I messed that up. I got carried away. All right, let me just welcome you. Matt, you are so welcome to our show, and it's an absolute honor to have you here.
It's great to be back here, Eric. Thank you.
Yeah, Matt, you have worked with thousands of people on improving their health and sex lives. How do you see the connection between spirituality and sexual health?
People don't realize it because the view of sex is more of a something to be a little bit ashamed of because
Yeah,
we were taught that right all along.
right.
As you probably are familiar with, there's an Ayurvedic tradition, there's a Taoist
Mhm.
tradition, there's a tantric
Yeah,
tradition where we view sex as, in a different light, in a more spiritual way. But
yeah.
I've studied those, in translation. I don't read the original, but I studied those for many, many years. And one of the things that I
Mhm.
saw was that they're focused on the man, not the woman. They were kind of focused on men who are practicing a spiritual enlightenment, but the women didn't play a part in that. They're kind of a little bit male
Yeah.
centric, chauvinist, you know. And when I sort of started with all this, I realized that people view sex in our world as not only shameful, but it's more like we got to get our rocks off. We got to get a
Yeah.
release.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all about that moment of a release. Then we go, "Ah, good. I don't have to worry about that for a couple
Yeah.
hours, a couple days." Uh, and so we missed out completely on any spiritual aspect of it. And if we go back and we look at some of the what the ancients have written about it, we can see it in a completely different light.
Definitely. Wow, that's wonderful. I mean, it's really important to teach on this subject because I believe that it has been considered a taboo in our society, and it's really important to be aware about all of this. So yeah, I mean, it's really amazing. Can you share a
I work
specific story? Yeah, yeah, sure. Go ahead, please.
I worked with Gary Robinson and Marnia Robinson, who published a landmark book, Cupid's
Hmm.
Poisoned Arrow, and their whole discussion was about how to reach a higher level of spiritual awakening and awareness and connection through sex. And they just got pilloried, Eric. They got pilloried. They got lawsuits. That they got such hostility. And it's like I have encountered the same thing. It's okay to talk about sex as far as getting your rocks off and release, but as soon as you start talking about it in a different way, so Gary put out a website called Your Brain on Porn, and he just has very factual information. It's helped hundreds of thousands of men avoid porn and sort of start seeing the connection they could have with somebody that goes
Yeah.
beyond just a physical one. And
Yeah.
today we have a tremendous crisis because so many guys are um, abstaining from relationships altogether.
Yeah.
They get their sort of needs met, quote unquote, with porn. Women get their quote needs met with social media, and there's a huge decline in dating and interest in relationships. Have you noticed that? Where you
Yeah,
live?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, definitely, definitely. It's just a story of, I believe, with our generation, the Gen Zs, it's the story of every individual, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. And my wife Jody, I was talking about this with her, and she said, "Well, people don't understand. How can they have a real connection if they don't actually have a connection?" And yet,
Yeah.
it's a very low end, low way of living, and people don't know what they're missing. And so, I work with a lot of guys who are older, and I also work with a lot of young men. Young men
Yeah.
started coming to me around 2010, 2012 because they
Mhm.
were having ED and they didn't know why and they wanted to be able to be functioning and have a great sex life. And I've
Yeah.
worked with a lot of people to sort of show them that porn and is really hurting them because they need to get away from that, and then the brain can start to rewire from porn to real people, and then they start
Yeah.
understanding the subtlety, the depth, the emotional reach that you have with another person that you can't possibly have
Yeah.
without that. And
Definitely.
I'm hoping we can get the word out and help people realize what they're missing.
Yeah. Wow. That's wonderful. That's really amazing. Yeah, it's really important because it's all right. It's like in a world of quick fixes, I believe even when it comes to our sexual health, we are looking for quick fixes or we are looking for a temporary relief rather, going for something
Yeah,
meaningful.
exactly. So here, that's a great point. So quick fix,
Mm,
it's sort of like the difference between junk food and real food, right? You can have your
mm,
needs met for a while on junk food. You're not hungry anymore, but then you're
yeah,
thirsty, then you get unhealthy, then you get sick. It's because
yeah,
that junk food's substituted for real food. So porn and social media are a substitute for real relationships. And
yeah.
I like to give people ideas about what they can do when they're dating and meeting people, and I can share a few of the kind of unusual tips with you if you would like. Um,
Sure, sure. Please go ahead.
so one of the things that I notice when I'm observing people who are dating or looking to form a relationship is they don't really understand that meeting somebody in a romantic sense is all
Mhm.
about closing physical space, because we're always normally with strangers and even with our family, we have a certain space that is between us. But when you're entering a
Yeah.
romantic relationship, you have to close that space. And I think a big mistake that I see being made is that people aren't getting physical quick enough. And I don't mean going to bed quickly. I just mean that you have to close that space and you have to both be comfortable, being next to each other. And the best thing is to do that on the very first time that you meet. And again, I'm not saying that you should
Mm,
be having sex for the first time you meet, but you want to get kissy and cuddly the first time you meet. Because if
mm,
there's not a compatibility and an interest of that, there's no need to go further. And that's how in our bodies the chemistry starts taking place. Love and connection are so hormonal. And by closing the space quickly, we start building on this hormone that's generated mostly in our brains called oxytocin. And
Yep.
oxytocin makes us have a connection with somebody, a loving feeling about with
I
somebody.
love hormone.
It's a love hormone. It's a security and
Yeah.
trust hormone. Yeah, exactly. And so what we kind of want to do is we want to get physical, close that space as quickly as possible. And even if
Mm,
if you're a man and the woman isn't that comfortable with that, that's probably not a good not really good to go further with that person. Um,
mm,
but the other mistake that is being made by a lot of people today who are dating is they do
mhm,
go to sex right away. And I think
mhm.
that's a huge mistake. Marnia Robinson, in her landmark book, and Gary had talked about the building oxytocin, and I totally agree. For a while, even in an existing relationship, by not actually having sex, but by doing other stuff that's physical together. This kind of thing that used to be a big thing they used to call, well, they had different words for it in the past, but yeah, courting kind of behavior, cuddling, holding hands, looking into each other's eyes. When you look into someone's eyes, you know how difficult that is to look into someone's eyes for 20, 30, 40 seconds. Um,
Yeah.
I've been with my wife for a long time, and look, I'll say, look at me, and I'll have her look into my eyes. It's very difficult for her. And it's like the intensity and the intimacy that is built with just looking in each other's eyes is incredible. And it's something that I
Uh,
highly recommend that you do to start building that connection and and feeling that depth. Because the reality is, I had never realized this, but the amount of love that you can feel, the amount of peace and love, and sort of like the title of your podcast, the spiritual
mm,
connection you can build with sex is absolutely mind-boggling, mind-boggling.
mm,
But the key
mm,
to it are going to be in all those other things you do other than
mm.
intercourse necessarily, eye gazing, hand holding, cuddling. And a lot of women think that men don't like these things because men always seem to be all just focused on, let's get it in there, let's stick it in. But the reality is men love that just as much as women do. They may not want to admit it because they think it's not as manly or masculine, but men love cuddling, holding hands, kissing. looking into a person's eyes. I mean, just as much as women do. So it's an absolutely wonderful way of starting to build this bond and starting to increase the amount of love that you can feel in your heart and this spiritual connection with another person. So that's a big one. And another one is kissing. A lot of times in an existing relationship, people stop kissing. They
Yeah.
basically life, has gone on, and maybe they have had children or they have children, and everything is busy in our lives, and they just forget about these things. Kissing, especially locking lips and having a long 30 or 40-second kiss is absolutely incredible and, absolutely amazing. And it's very arousing too, but it's a really great way of increasing the emotional depth in a relationship. And it doesn't stop whether you're just meeting someone or whether you've been together for 50 years. Exactly the same.
Um, yeah. Uh, that's lovely. So it's amazing. So how do you see the role of relationships in maintaining both sexual and overall health? Like when I say relationships, I don't mean romantic relationships, but the relationships around us. Because it's funny how I just wrote it in my exam, and this was a research done in the US in I think 2018, and it said that 90% of our problems in our lives are relational problems. Again, not just romantic relationships, but the relationships with our friends, with our families. So how do you think you see a role in relationships in maintaining both sexual and overall health?
Well, when I started sort of practicing a different form of sex, which, with all due respect to anyone who's Hindu, we call nirvana sex. With a we don't mean it as a religious insult, but when I started practicing this, I started having much better relationships with my children, my not just with my wife, my children, and other people. My health started improving radically, and I think it's because I was always feeling like I never had enough. I never had enough. And I would say that for men especially, they go through their lives feeling like they're shortchanged, that they don't get enough. And if you feel like you're being shortchanged, you're not getting enough, then that is going to translate into your interactions, your behaviors with other people. You actually have a resentment that is sort of at your core, feeling like I'm a
Mm,
victim, I'm not getting enough. And yet, so when I
mm,
did this, it started to brim over in my life with sexual, the time I was spending with my wife, the time we were having sex, 45 minutes or an hour. Nowadays it's even twice a day. And I never have a feeling that I don't have enough. I have a feeling of great abundance. And this has made
mm,
me very much able to deal with stress much better, dealing with difficult things in life, dealing with the death of loved ones or the financial pressures that, will affect all of
yeah.
us at one time or another, because of having that practice. It has created an amount of security in my heart and in my brain, a feeling of having enough, of life being wonderful, and I've been able to much more easily withstand the difficult times, and I've been much more generous with the people around me, listening to them, waiting for them to finish speaking, paying more
Yeah.
attention, more respect for them, and I feel like I'm a much better person for that.
Oh, that's wonderful. Wow. Healthy relationships are indeed the cornerstone of a fulfilling life. And I think your story about how relationships and what you just share is just beautifully illustrates this connection. So, wow. And lastly, what are some practical steps that people can take today to improve their sexual health and overall well-being? I know that you have mentioned in dating life and how, the kissing and the cuddling, but what do you think besides that? Again, in a relationship and then outside a relationship, because I believe that in a relationship, when there are two people coming together, however, in an individual lifestyle, there are factors that affect and contribute to the sexual health of people, um, of two people who are coming together. So, what do you think would be the quick tips or exercises that our listeners can try right now?
I think that the world around us is conspiring to lock us down into this feeling of never having enough, and it does that by having sex in every ad, every commercial, every movie, every TV show, and every time we see something sexual, it triggers a spurt of dopamine in the reward center of our brain, the nucleus accumbens in our brain. The reward center gets that dopamine fix, and this happens from gambling, buying stuff on credit cards we can't afford, shopping, all sorts of things that create that spurt of dopamine. But the sexual part of it is much more powerful than anything
Mm.
else. And so if you look away, if you resist the fantasy, if you think of something else, if you use distraction, if you don't watch those scenes, you find that you start feeling a lot better about everything in life. You start being more attracted to your partner. If you're dating or you want to find a partner, becomes much more easy to find a partner when you're avoiding these. And I'm talking about the sexy girls. I'm talking about looking at exercise videos or reading dating sites and looking at pretty girls. Anything that is very stimulating and gets us sort of a little bit aroused and excited is something to avoid. If we avoid that, we are sensitizing our brains so that we're much, much more interested in a real connection, in a real person. And if we're looking for a romantic partner,
Uh,
we're much more likely to be finding that person because we're much more open. We have an emptiness that can be filled with somebody else rather than being filled with triggers and porn and all of that. And if we have an existing relationship, we become much more interested in our partner, and the romantic and the sexual connection becomes greater and greater. So the big enemy of this is going to be all the fantasy from the triggers around us in all the ads and all the movies, all the TV shows, let alone porn. So by avoiding that, I think
yeah.
notice that you just start feeling a lot better about everything in life. That's one of the biggest tips. If you're in a relationship, then I suggest that you schedule, if you can, just naked cuddling. It doesn't have to be naked. You could just do it watching TV. You can be fully clothed. But one thing is, a lot of times couples will watch TV together at night and they'll be on separate, one will be on one side of the couch, one will be on the other. Close that space. Remember I mentioned at the beginning, Arick, about closing physical space when you're dating somebody as like the most important thing. Well, it's just as important if you're together for a long time. Start going on the same side, cuddle, hold hands when you're watching TV. Start doing those things that you might have done when you were first really falling in love with each other. And that's like really, really builds this connection and starts making life seem so much better.
That's wonderful. That's really lovely. Thank you so much, Matt, for sharing your invaluable insights and experiences with us. Wow, it's been really lovely. The tips that you share, even the last time and this time, it's really lovely. So for those of you who are tuning in, remember that your journey to better health and fulfilling sex life starts with small, actionable steps. Don't be afraid to explore, ask questions, seek out the support you need. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends. And as always, stay curious, stay healthy, and keep striving for that inner peace. Until next time, this is Eric signing off from Inner Peace, Better Health. Take care.